Cold. Piercing cold. Like countless ice needles stabbing into the gaps in my bones all at once, seeping outward from the marrow. I snapped my eyes open. My vision was a sheet of scarlet, red snow, red trees, a red sky. I blinked a few times before realizing it was the blood from my forehead matting the corners of my eyes. I tried to raise a hand to wipe it away, but my wrists wouldn't budge. Rough hemp rope had my hands bound tightly behind a red pine trunk, and a stinking rag was stuffed in my mouth, making every breath agony. I shook my groggy head, and my vision gradually came into focus. An endless expanse of white snow, the old forests of the greater Shingon Mountains howling with gale-force winds. 3 men in dogskin hats and tattered black padded jackets were rummaging through the furs in a back basket. I remembered. Winter, 1983. In my previous life, it had also been today. I was carrying a month's worth of furs my family had saved up to sell in the county town when I was clubbed unconscious at the edge of these old woods. The furs were stolen, and one of my legs was broken. To scrape together the 600 yuan needed to treat my leg, Wanya, the woman I was about to marry, sold herself to Guofei, a rich bully from the county town. A month later, she hanged herself in the Guo family's woodshed. By the time they found her, her body had gone cold. That became the thorn in my heart for the rest of my life. After that, I drank myself senseless every day and forced myself through hatred into becoming a top hunter, but it was all too late. In the end, after draining a bottle of baijiu in front of Wenya's grave, I fell asleep just like that in the -40-degree greater Shingon Mountains. And then, I opened my eyes again. My enemies were right in front of me. Whether it was heaven's pity or fate's design, I had returned to the day that completely ruined my life. At this moment, the 3 robbers were still immersed in the ecstasy of stealing the furs, completely unaware that I was already awake. I didn't look at the furs they had tossed into a mess. My gaze locked firmly on the side of the scar-faced man's foot. There lay a long oilcloth-wrapped bundle. It was a gun, a Type 56 semi-automatic rifle. These 3 robbers had just stolen guns from the Armed Forces Department in the neighboring county, and while passing through here, they happened to run into me carrying furs. I stared at that oilcloth bundle, and the look in my eyes changed. There was no fear, no panic, only a murderous intent so intense it was almost solid, on the verge of spilling from my eyes. I slowly closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath of icy, bone-piercing air, letting that chill sink from my throat all the way down into my dantian. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer that ignorant young man. I was a revenant clawing my way out of hell, a top hunter who had fought and survived in these old forests for decades. My wrists began to twist. The bark of the red pine was as rough as an iron rasp, filing away at the hemp rope with every movement, and filing away at my wrists too. My skin split open, flesh torn, blood streaming down through my fingers and staining a dark red ring into the snow. Did it hurt? Yes. But compared to the pain of holding Wenya's cold corpse in my previous life, what was this little suffering of torn flesh? Snap! A faint, brittle crack, swallowed by the howling north wind. The hemp rope broke. I didn't move. I kept leaning against the trunk in the posture of being bound, while secretly starting to undo the rope around my legs. As I worked the knot loose, I slowly rubbed my nearly numb, frost-bitten legs with my palms until beneath the deadened skin, that needle prick ache of returning sensation surged back again. Then I pulled the rag from my mouth and silently threw it into the snow. Whoa! The wind suddenly intensified, whipping up a sky full of snow mist. Now, I dropped flat onto the snow, like a cold, venomous snake, and using the wind and the cover of the shrubs, crawled inch by inch toward the backs of the 3 robbers. I kept my breathing shallow, using both hands and feet, my eyes never leaving that Type 56 rifle. The nearest robber was 3 meters away. 2 meters. 1 meter. Whoa! Another gust of violent wind swept through, and snow mist filled the pine forest. The packed snow beneath my feet exploded. I sprang up in an instant like a leopard ready to strike, my right hand scooping up the skinning knife the robber had tossed on the ground. It was the kind normally used for skinning hides, the blade already sharp enough to split a hair. Not a word wasted, not a moment's hesitation. I pressed close behind the robber rummaging through the furs, clamped his mouth and nose shut with my left hand like an iron vise, and drove the skinning knife in my right hand backward and viciously into the gap at the back of his neck along the spine. Uft! The soft sound of the blade severing his central nervous system was perfectly swallowed by the wind. The robber's eyes bulged out violently, and his body went limp in my arms in an instant, as if all the bones had been pulled out of him. Killed with a single strike. I held the corpse in my arms, using it to shield half my body. Third, what the hell are you dawdling for? The scar-faced man urged without even lifting his head. There was no response. The scar-faced man frowned and turned around. At the very instant he looked back, I suddenly exerted both arms and hurled the corpse in my arms straight at him with all my force. Wah! The scar-faced man instinctively raised an arm to block, his footing thrown off, and his right hand reflexively reached for the Type 56 on the ground. But he was too slow. Borrowing the momentum of the flying corpse, I rushed right in after it, kicked that oilcloth bundle away with precision, and at the same time whipped a backhand punch, carrying all the rage and hatred of both my past and present lives solidly into his Adam's apple. Crack! The tooth-gritting sound of shattering was especially clear in the north wind. The scar-faced man's eyes rolled back white, and he crashed to the ground like a dead tree chopped in half, his mouth opening and closing desperately but unable to make a sound. Only the hissing of a broken windpipe, like a torn bellows, quickly faded away. The last pockmarked robber had long since been scared out of his wits. He had even forgotten he was a robber, scrambling and stumbling as he bolted deeper into the woods, letting out pig slaughter screams from his throat. And murder. I didn't chase him. I slowly stood up, gripped the knife handle tight, and gave it a savage fling. Whoosh! The skinning knife tore through the air, carrying both old and new hatred straight for the fleeing robber's back. Poochie! The spinning skinning knife buried itself to the hilt in the center of his back. The pockmarked robber's running body suddenly stiffened, and he turned to look at me dully, his eyes filled with horror and disbelief. He couldn't understand how, after running more than 20 meters away, the knife could still pierce his heart with such uncanny precision, as if it had eyes. Fuck you! Before he could finish, a gush of bloody foam erupted from his mouth, and he toppled with a thud into the knee-deep snow. Wind and snow roared, and dead silence returned between heaven and earth. I did not stop, striding quickly to the pockmarked robber, planting one foot on his back, gripping the knife handle, and yanking it upward hard. Poochie! A spray of dark red blood shot out like arrows. I instinctively twisted aside, and the blood spray grazed the tip of my ear and flew past, splashing onto the snow and burning countless tiny ice holes into it. I spat out the blood foam that had gotten into my mouth, grabbed the corpse by the ankle, and dragged it beneath the red pine, piling it together with the other two bodies. Then I picked up 2 lengths of thick hemp rope, expertly tied them together, firmly bound the 3 corpses by their ankles into a single bundle, and slung the other end over my shoulder. Bent at the waist like a silent old ox pulling a plow, I dragged the 3 bodies one deep pit step at a time toward the depths of the old forest. After roughly the time it takes to smoke a pipe, the surrounding trees grew denser and the light dimmer and dimmer. I stopped, untied the rope, and began stripping the corpses. The black oilcloth padded jackets, torn pants, Ula's boots, even their underwear. I left them with nothing, stripping them completely bare. Then I used the skinning knife to slit open the linings. Rip! There came the delightful rustle of paper. 3 stacks of brand new Great Unity notes, a full 3,000 yuan. There were also 2 industrial coupons, 3 cloth coupons, and 100 gene of nationwide grain coupons. A huge sum. My eyelids didn't even twitch as I naturally tucked them into my inner pocket. This was what they owed me in the first place. The interest on one of my legs, and Winya's life from my previous life. I found a snow pit sheltered from the wind, gathered all the clothes, shoes, socks, and hemp rope into a pile like a small hill, struck a match, and fed it into the bottom. The black oilcloth padded winter jackets were stuffed with shoddy black cotton that caught fire the moment it met a flame. Thick black smoke billowed up, and the flames quickly shot higher. I snapped off a pine branch nearby, warming my hands and feet by the fire, while coldly poking through the blaze to make sure every last piece burned to ashes. Only after the final spark died out did I pull out a pack of cheap cigarettes and tap it against the lingering embers on the stick, then took a hard, deep drag. The harsh taste of low-grade tobacco rushed straight into my lungs. In that instant, every one of the 36,000 pores on my body seemed to sigh in relief. I had been reborn, and my great revenge was avenged. The good days were only just beginning. I stood up and glanced at the 3 pale, naked bodies lying there frozen blue and stiff, my brow furrowing slightly. The clothes were easy enough to deal with, but where should I dump the corpses? My gaze swept the surroundings, and when I spotted a bottomless-looking snow gully not far ahead, my eyes lit up. I strode over, bent down, grabbed one corpse by the ankle, dragged it to the edge of the gully with one hand, and gave it a violent heave. Plop! The packed snow was like quicksand, swallowing the body whole in an instant without a trace. Repeating the process, in less than a minute all 3 stripped corpses had been devoured by the snow gully. It was the 12th lunar month now. Who would go rummaging around in a death gully like this that could collapse at any moment? And when spring came and the snow melted, I let out a cold laugh. The greater Shingon Range never lacked wild beasts. Once the snow melted in spring, those starving wolf packs, lean as skeletons, would gnaw these 3 rotting bodies clean in less than half a day, leaving not even bone fragments behind. After tying up the loose ends, I followed my own footprints back, casually sweeping the traces flat with pine branches as I went. The scene looked exactly the same as at the beginning, except for the oilcloth bundle lying quietly on the snow. I crouched down and untied it. A gleaming Type 56 semi-automatic rifle was exposed to the air. Holding that gun, both my hands began trembling uncontrollably. As an old hand who had hunted in the mountains for decades, I knew all too well what it meant to possess a brand new Type 56 semi-auto in the early 1980s. No matter how ferocious the wild beasts in the Shingon Range were, in front of this gun, they were nothing more than a single bullet away. I skillfully pulled back the bolt, and with a click the receiver opened. One look made my pupils contract sharply, and a layer of cold sweat instantly broke out on my forehead. Lying quietly in the chamber was a gleaming brass round. I quickly bit down on my cigarette, and worked the bolt back and forth in rapid succession. One yellow rifle round after another dropped onto the snow. Including the one in the chamber, there were 11 rounds in total. 1 in the chamber and 10 loaded full in the magazine below. This was a life-saving setup only a ruthless man who knew guns would leave ready. I wiped away a cold sweat. If anything had gone wrong today, all it would have taken was one curl of his finger, and the one lying in that snow gully would have been me. I picked up the bullets one by one and loaded them back into the magazine, wrapped the Type 56 tight in oilcloth, dug more than a meter down into the snow under a tree, and buried it there. Then tamped it down and used a branch to sweep wind-blown patterns over the surface. It was a fine gun, but I absolutely could not bring it into the county town right now. After finishing all that, I returned to the willow basket. The furs scattered all over the ground had already been covered by a layer of wind-blown snow. Pained, I patted off the snow dust, carefully folded the pelts and stacked them into the basket, then slung it over my back and strode toward the county town. The rice jar at home had long been empty. My parents were tightening their belts to save grain, my younger siblings were sallow and emaciated from hunger, and the whole family was counting on this basket of pelts to trade for life-saving rations. The thought of those dearest to me, whom I had felt guilty toward for half my life and my previous life, made my steps quicken even more. Hiya. Whoa-ho. After hurrying on for about 2 li, I suddenly heard the faint sound of urgent hoofbeats and the swishing of a sled skimming over the snow coming from behind. I quickly stepped aside and looked back. Through the vast white haze, a reddish-brown horse came hurtling over, pulling a large wooden sled. On it sat a bearded man in an army green coat and a dogskin hat, with a thick layer of white frost clinging to the brim and his eyebrows. The moment he passed my side, he suddenly yanked the reins tight. Whoa! The chestnut horse reared and let out a long neigh, coming to a hard stop just 3 meters away from me. Every muscle in my body instantly tensed, and my right hand silently moved toward the hilt of the hunting knife at my lower back. In these old forests of the greater Shingon Range, I could be ruthless, and so could others. But the man stood up, flashed me a mouthful of big yellow teeth, and laughed heartily. Little brother, heading into the county town? I gave a slight nod. Yeah, going into town to take care of something. Don't be nervous, little brother. I'm not some drifter who waylays people. Guandishan from Kaoshan Village. Heard of me? That's me, Guandishan. In my previous life, I really had heard that name like thunder in my ears. He was a famously top-notch old hunter from all the villages around, nicknamed Cannon Guan, an excellent shot, rich in experience, and famous for being warm-hearted too. I concealed my killing intent, cupped my fists with both hands and said, "So it's Brother Guan. I've long admired your great name." It's just an empty reputation, not worth mentioning. Guan Dashin stretched out one big hand, directly took my basket off, and shoved me toward the sled. In this freezing weather, if you walk all the way to the county town, your legs will freeze right off. Hurry and get on. Unable to refuse such hospitality, I simply climbed on openly, pulled some dry grass over my legs, and sat down. Hiya. The chestnut horse suddenly burst forward, and the sled ground out a rapid clatter over the snow. The icy north wind poured straight into my face. and the white poplars on both sides blurred into pale shadows racing backward. "What's your name, little brother? And that injury on your forehead? Run into some trouble?" While flicking the reins, Guan Dashin kept glancing at my forehead from the corner of his eye, suspicion peculiar to an old hunter in his gaze. My heart sank. How could I dare say I just killed 3 robbers? I immediately put on a miserable look. "Brother Guan, my name's Liam. I was in a hurry, slipped, and smashed my head on a tree branch." "Bullshit," Guan Dashin spat. "That wound is bruised black and blue all around. Obviously someone clubbed you from behind." I was briefly speechless. You old hunter saw through it at a glance, so why insist on asking? Just to amuse yourself at my expense? Still, Guan Dashin understood the rules of the mountains. And when he saw I wouldn't talk, he just laughed and didn't press further. The sled raced on for a quarter of an hour, and a sharp bend with obstructed visibility appeared ahead. The moment he saw that turn, Guan Dashin's eyes lit up and he sprang to his feet, shouting at the top of his lungs. "Brother, see that big bend up ahead? Let your big brother show you a trick. Let me show you what real skill looks like. Hold on tight." Hiya. The moment I saw that curve, a sense of foreboding welled up in my heart. A normal person's first reaction at a blind hairpin would be to slow down. But not this guy. He was so excited his whole body was practically shaking. I clutched the hard wooden handrail at the edge of the sled and shouted, "Brother Guan, it's a dead turn up ahead, slow down. What are you panicking for? Your big brother's skills are top-notch, steady as can be." Guan Dashin burst into wild laughter in his raspy voice and cracked the whip viciously across the chestnut horse's rump. Stung by pain, the horse's 4 hooves flew frantically, kicking up ghostly afterimages in the snow. To the left of the county road was a steep mountainside, and to the right was a deep ditch over 2 meters wide, filled level with snow. When they reached the bend, the chestnut horse couldn't make the turn at all and charged straight toward the snow gully on the right. This time, even Guan Dashin panicked, yanking the reins desperately to the left. "You useless beast, where the hell are you running?" "Left." But once the horse was spooked, how could it still obey? Seeing the chestnut horse out of control, he could only haul back on the reins with all his might. Nay, the horse's front hooves slammed heavily onto the frozen ground, forcing it to a stop. But the wooden sled, weighing several hundred gen, was carrying tremendous inertia and swept straight sideways toward the horse's legs. At that critical instant, a sharp light flashed in my eyes as my long arm shot out and snatched the reins, my left hand locking onto the wooden handrail while my right arm wrapped the reins around my wrist 3 full times. "Get over here." With a low roar, the strength of my waist and abdomen erupted all at once, veins standing out on my right arm like little snakes as I twisted my waist and wrenched hard back to the left. Srip! The sled's iron runners scraped past the edge of the horse's hooves and plunged headfirst into the snow gully on the right. With a thunderous crash, man and horse went tumbling. In the instant of the rollover, I used the momentum to do a tactical roll and landed in a stable half-crouch on the snow, completely unharmed except for a mouthful of snow. Guan Dashin wasn't so lucky. Under the powerful centrifugal force, his whole body was flung 4 or 5 meters away like a human cannonball. With a thud, he went headfirst and plunged upside down into more than a meter of soft snow in the big snow ditch. Only a pair of fat legs and ula boots were left sticking up from the snow, kicking wildly in midair in panic. I spat out the snow in my mouth with a dark expression, walked over to him, crossed my arms, and looked at him coldly. Honestly, in both my past and present lives combined, I'd never seen such a death-wishing show-off. But burying someone in the snow could suffocate them to death in less than 3 minutes. And in the end, I couldn't just stand by and watch him die. I sighed, suddenly grabbed those wildly flailing ankles, and the muscles under my sleeves bulged high as I lowered my waist and gathered strength. "Get up for me." Liam let out a sharp breath and shouted, his spine suddenly snapping straight like a great dragon, and a savage mountain pulling force surged through both hands. He yanked Guan Dashin, who weighed over 170 gen, out like pulling up a radish. "Tui, tui, tui." The first thing Guan Dashin did after getting up was spit all the snow foam out of his mouth. He spat several more times, then wiped his mouth with his sleeve. The snow grain stuck to his face melted into droplets and ran down his chin. Then he began sizing up the young man before him again with a scrutinizing gaze. That look was like a hunter examining an unfamiliar prey from head to toe, then from toe to head, finally stopping on Li Mo's steady eyes. "Mosey, couldn't tell at all. Nice moves. Interested in working with me? I guarantee you'll live well." If it were anyone else, faced with Guan Dashin's invitation, They'd definitely be so excited they'd be at a loss for words, nodding again and again in agreement. But who was Liamo? He was someone reborn with the memories of his previous life. His hunting skills were in no way inferior to Guandashan's, and he preferred working alone. So without the slightest hesitation, he refused Guandashan's invitation. "Brother Guan, I'm honored that you think highly of me, but for now I have no plans to work with anyone." Guandashan showed not the slightest displeasure at Liamo's refusal. Instead, he looked at Liamo with a kind of approving gaze. "Young man, it's only normal not to want to live under someone else's roof. But when you make it big someday, don't you dare forget your brother Guan." With that, he began cleaning up the mess all over the ground. He picked up the dog fur hat that had been flung away earlier, patted the snow off it against his knee, and put it back on his head. "Brother Guan, listen to you. Within these parts, is there anyone more capable than you?" Making promises of benefits to someone you've just met by chance wasn't Liamo's style. As for what would happen in the future, that all depended on fate's arrangements. "I'll help you." With that, he walked over to the sled and first untied the reins fastened to the chestnut horse. He slung them over his own shoulder and climbed up out of the big snow ditch. The reins bit a deep mark into his shoulder. Even through the cotton-padded jacket, he could feel that rough friction. "Brother Guan, I'll pull from up here. You give it a shove from below." Liamo gripped the reins, half hunched over, looking ready to exert force at any moment. His feet were set one in front of the other. The front foot planted firmly in the snow, the back foot sunk deep into it. Down in the big snow ditch, Guandashan gripped one end of the sled tightly with both hands and shoved upward hard. 1, 2, 3. As the loud chant rang out, Liamo suddenly drove with both legs, his whole body leaning forward. His face flushed red from the strain, the veins on his forehead bulging out one by one. The reins over his shoulders stretched taut and let out squeaking sounds. Swish! Just like that, the two of them hauled the sled out of the big snow ditch. The front end of the sled knocked against the road surface, shaking off a large mass of snow. That was simply taken care of. So next was the chestnut horse. At this moment, all four of the chestnut horse's legs were deeply trapped in the snow, with even half its belly sunk in. The snow had buried it up to the girth, and its four legs thrashed about in the snow without finding the slightest point of leverage. It was in a half-suspended state. This horse was nothing like the sled. The horse was a living creature and weighed several hundred jin. The two men pushed and pulled in the big snow ditch, and the chestnut horse also tried hard, kicking desperately with all four legs. But the packed snow offered no point of leverage at all, so all it could do was useless work. The snow foam kicked up by its hooves splashed all over Guandashan's face, and another mouthful got into the mouth he'd just cleaned out. There was no other way, so the two of them could only resort to the most primitive method. With both hands, they rapidly scraped away the snow around the horse's legs until they had cleared away most of the meter-deep snow. The four hands of the two men were like four shovels, sending snow flying everywhere. Liamo's fingers were frozen red, his fingernails packed with snow foam, and the skin on the backs of his hands had turned pale from the cold. Guandashan simply rolled up his sleeves, revealing half of his thick forearms. His palms were as big as cattail fans. One handful of snow from him equaled two from Liamo. After regaining its footing, the chestnut horse suddenly drove hard with its hind legs and leaped to the side, out of the big snow ditch. Back on the road, the horse shook its mane and snorted, as if complaining that this suffering had been completely undeserved. As for Liamo and Guandashan, they were already so exhausted they lay in the snow, too tired to move at all. Their chests heaved violently, white puffs of breath rising one after another. After resting for quite a while and smoking several cigarettes in a row, Liamo stood up from the ground, patted the snow foam off his backside, and began gathering up the pelts scattered all over the ground. Meanwhile, Guandashan obediently tied the reins back on again. By the time they set off once more, the sun was already high in the sky. This time, no matter what, Liamo refused to let Guandashan drive the sled. He directly took over, sitting in the driver's seat, and drove the sled toward the county town at full speed without saying a word. Guandashan ended up with some leisure. Sitting to the side, he began chattering nonstop, asking about Liamo's family situation. "Mosey, where do you live? How many people are in your family? What's your birth order?" What answered him was Liamo's cold and drawn-out cry. "Hiya." Guandashan asked several more questions in succession, and seeing that Liamo was focused on driving the sled and wouldn't answer, he leaned against the railing and began resting with his eyes closed. He pulled the dog fur hat down over his face, folded both arms across his chest, and let his body sway with the jolting of the sled. Another quarter of an hour passed, and they finally arrived at the county town. Looking at the low buildings on both sides of the street covered in snow, Limo's eyes actually grew a little moist. The outer walls of these houses were whitewashed, the window frames were wooden, some windows were pasted over with newspapers, others were nailed over with plastic sheeting. Now and then 1 or 2 pedestrians could be seen on the street, all dressed in the same gray-blue cotton-padded jackets, necks hunched as they hurried by. He hadn't seen this kind of drab architecture for decades. Following the memories of his previous life, Limo went straight to the entrance of the supply and marketing cooperative. It had a double wooden door, and above the lintel hung a white sign with red characters, with the 5 bold characters, "Serve the people," written on it. Tossing out a line, "Brother Guan, I'm here." He hoisted the basket on his back and walked toward the counter that specialized in buying pelts. It was right at mealtime, and the supply and marketing cooperative was quiet as could be. The spacious shop floor was empty, and the sales clerks behind the counters were all slumped over the countertops dozing off, while the fluorescent lights overhead emitted a buzzing electric hum. The man in charge of buying pelts was an old fellow around 50, currently nodding off against the counter. His head was tilted, a glistening string of drool hanging from the corner of his mouth, with even snores coming from his nose. The little goatee on his chin bobbed up and down with his breathing. "Sir, I'm here to sell pelts," Limo called out politely. The old man in charge of purchases had been having a nice dream, and being abruptly woken by someone instantly made him annoyed. He suddenly opened his eyes, his brows twisting into a deep furrow, and the moment he opened his mouth, filthy words were about to come flying out. Just as he was about to curse a few times, he looked up and saw the scabbed wound on Limo's forehead, as well as the bloodstains on his clothes. In weather this cold, he hadn't even bandaged the wound and still came to sell pelts. Clearly a ruthless man. The old man decisively shut his mouth and forcibly swallowed back the curse words that hadn't yet come out. The curse rolled around in his throat, then went gulp and slid back down into his stomach. When he looked up again, he was already wearing a smiling expression. The smile came suddenly. The wrinkles on his face hadn't yet recovered from the anger just before, making the smile look somewhat stiff. "Young man, what kinds of hides are you looking to sell? I won't take poor quality hides." "Don't worry, sir. How would I dare bring bad hides to you? With your keen eye, sir, bringing bad hides here would just be asking for trouble, wouldn't it? As the saying goes, of all things that can wear out, flattery never does." In just a short sentence, Limo not only praised the old man's sharp eye, but also complimented his professionalism. Sure enough, the old man was quite pleased, grinning from ear to ear. The wrinkles piled up at the corners of his eyes could pinch a fly to death, and those few front teeth yellowed by pipe tobacco were fully exposed. Limo seized the chance to take the hides out of the basket one by one and arrange them on the counter by category. 20 gray dog pelts, 11 wildcat pelts, and 1 firefox pelt. When Limo took out the firefox pelt, the purchasing clerk's eyes lit up, and he quickly took it and examined it carefully in his hands. First, he spread the pelt open toward the light, looking through the fur at the quality of the hide, then ran his fingers smoothly along the fur. The fiery red fox fur slipped through his fingers like a stream of flowing flame. After quite a while, the old man raised his head again, his eyes full of admiration. "Young man, this firefox was caught in a snare, wasn't it? There isn't a single hole on the whole body, and your skinning and tanning techniques are first-rate too. I can take this pelt as first grade." He leaned in for another close look and clicked his tongue in admiration. You can't develop this kind of skill without 10 or 20 years of practice. Next, the purchasing clerk inspected all the hides thoroughly. As expected, every one of them was first grade. He turned each pelt over and over, examining it again and again, nodding now and then and smacking his lips in appreciation. Then the purchasing clerk took an abacus from the counter and started clacking away. The beads flew up and down beneath his fingers, rattling crisply. As he calculated, he muttered to himself, his fingers moving so fast they were little more than a blur. 1 firefox pelt is 80 yuan, 1 gray dog pelt is 2 yuan, so 20 make 40 yuan, 1 wildcat pelt is 1.2 yuan, so 11 make 13.2 yuan. Altogether that comes to 133.2 yuan. Take a look and see if there's any problem. If not, I'll write you a receipt. Limo quickly did the math in his head and nodded to the purchasing clerk. 80 plus 40 plus 13.2 yuan, 133.2 yuan exactly, not a cent off. "Sir, there's no problem. Please write me the receipt." After getting Limo's confirmation, the purchasing clerk took out a purchase voucher book from the drawer and swiftly wrote down the categories and prices on it. Finally, he took out an official seal and breathed on it a few times. He held the seal up to his mouth and blew 2 breaths of warm air onto it. The ink pad, warmed by his breath, took on a moist sheen across its surface. Smack! He stamped it onto the voucher. When he lifted the seal, a bright red round stamp mark was left on the paper, with the words Qingshan County Supply and Marketing Cooperative Special Purchase Seal on it. Then he handed it to Li Mo with a smile and said, "Young man, it can't have been easy making a trip into town. You must still have a lot to buy, so hurry and take the slip to get your money." "Thank you, sir." Li Mo took the voucher from the purchasing clerk, thanked him, and turned toward the settlement area on the other side. The person handling settlement was a young male clerk. With his head lowered, he was absent-mindedly trimming his nails, using a small file to rub back and forth over them, nail filings falling in a soft shower onto the tabletop. He took the settlement voucher from Li Mo and carefully checked the stamp and the quantity. He held the voucher up in front of his eyes and examined the official seal against the light, then tapped the numbers on it with his finger and checked them one by one. He pulled out a stack of 10 yuan notes from the cabinet, counted out 13 of them, then counted out 3 1 yuan notes and 1 2 jiao note. Li Mo took the money and counted it carefully once more. He separated the bills one by one, silently counting in his head. After confirming the amount was correct, he nodded to the young clerk and turned to leave. When he got to the general goods section, he didn't see any clerk. Li Mo looked carefully inside the counter again and saw a middle-aged saleswoman lying in a chair, fast asleep. Her head lolled to one side, her mouth slightly open, her snores neither too loud nor too soft, and the blue work uniform on her body was all wrinkled. Knock, knock, knock. Li Mo lightly tapped the glass counter 3 times with his finger. "Miss, I want to buy something." The saleswoman acted as if she hadn't heard him, adjusted her posture, and went on sleeping. She turned over, putting her back to Li Mo, and her snoring actually grew louder. "Hey, miss, wake up. I want to buy something." Li Mo knocked on the counter again, his voice much louder this time. This knock made even the glass counter tremble. It immediately drew the attention of the other sales clerks. Behind the neighboring counters, someone looked up in this direction, then shrank back again as if it had nothing to do with them. The saleswoman suddenly sat up from the chair, and one look at Li Mo's appearance made her instantly explode as if she'd swallowed gunpowder. "What are you yelling for? Can't you see I'm sleeping? If you want to buy something, wait. Come back and buy it when I wake up." After cursing him out, she lay back down in the chair and continued her sweet dreams. She even shifted the chair farther to the side, farther from the counter, making it obvious she didn't want to bother with him. Li Mo was so angry he laughed instead, and his face instantly darkened. The corners of his mouth twitched, but there wasn't the slightest warmth in that smile. Bang! Li Mo slammed his hand down on the counter. This slap was 10 times louder than the last 2 knocks, so hard that even the abacus beads on the counter jumped. The saleswoman shuddered in fright and nearly rolled off the chair. She had just sat up when Li Mo pointed at her nose and shouted, "Is this what you call serving the people? Since when do workers and peasants coming to the supply and marketing cooperative to buy things have to look at a sales clerk's face? Looks to me like you're wearing the hat of capitalism." In those days, that was an extremely serious accusation. China was a typical socialist country, and in earlier times, once someone was labeled with the hat of capitalism, they would be arrested and struggled against. The saleswoman trembled with anger, unable even to speak properly. Her fingers shook as she pointed at Li Mo, her lips quivering several times before she finally forced out a complete sentence. You're talking nonsense. Who's capitalist? You'd better explain yourself clearly. Otherwise, I'll go to the police station and report you for making trouble at the supply and marketing cooperative. They'll arrest you and throw you behind bars." Li Mo stared at the saleswoman in front of him and said coldly, "Since you're not capitalist, then why won't you sell things to us ordinary people?" His icy gaze, together with the wound on his forehead and the bloodstains on his clothes, made the saleswoman's scalp go numb. She only felt as though there were 2 knives hidden in those eyes, and the look made every hair on her body stand on end. I, she stammered for a long time, trembling, her tongue seeming tied in knots, twisting around in her mouth, unable to force out a complete word. Li Mo obviously wasn't about to indulge her like this. He slammed the counter again and said viciously, "What do you mean, I? Just tell me whether you're selling this stuff or not. In a minute, I'll go complain about you to your superior." At the mention of a complaint, the saleswoman was instantly alarmed and hurriedly waved her hands. "Don't, little brother, please don't complain about me. Whatever you need, I'll get it for you." Her tone softened at once, and all the earlier shrewishness vanished without a trace. Actually, she had no real reason to fear being complained about. In those days of ration purchasing, the The supply and marketing cooperative held an absolute monopoly. A sales clerk's job was the iron rice bowl among iron rice bowls. Ordinary people couldn't get it even if they wanted to. It was just that Li Mo's fierce glare had truly scared her, making her lose her composure. As Li Mo lightly counted the ration coupons in his hand, he reeled off item names one after another as if reading from a menu. 40 gene of rice, 40 gene of fine flour, 10 gene of soybean oil, 20 gene of sorghum liquor, 2 gene of white sugar, 2 gene of white rabbit candies, 2 gene of salt. At this point, he looked again at the 3 cloth coupons in his hand, all 3 worth 10 city chi and 30 chi of cotton cloth. The saleswoman was dumbfounded, her mouth hanging open for a long time without a word. Her mouth was open wide enough to fit an egg, and her eyes stared blankly at the stack of coupons in Li Mo's hand. Only after Li Mo finished listing everything did she ask in return. Huh? That huh? Came out long and loud, full of disbelief. Li Mo slapped the coupons in his hand onto the counter and barked. What do you mean, huh? Think I can't afford it? The saleswoman waved her hands repeatedly. No. She shook her head like a rattle drum. Li Mo's eyes were wide open, with several red blood vessels streaking the whites, making him look especially fierce. If not, then hurry up and get it ready for me. Oh. After responding, the saleswoman staggered toward the shelves in the back. Before long, the entire counter was piled full. Li Mo divided the supplies into 2 portions. The rice, refined flour, and sorghum liquor added up to exactly 100 gene worth of grain coupons. As for white rabbit, soybean oil, salt, and white sugar, those could only be bought as negotiated price goods. After checking everything over and confirming it was correct, the saleswoman took out an abacus and started calculating. Rice was 0.14 yuan per gene. 40 gene came to 5.6 yuan. Refined flour was 0.18 yuan per gene. 40 gene came to 7.4 yuan. And sorghum liquor was 0.3 yuan per gene. 20 gene came to 6 yuan. After calculating the coupon goods, she began calculating the negotiated price goods. White rabbit was 1.5 yuan per gene. 2 gene came to 3 yuan. Salt was 0.18 yuan per gene. 2 gene came to 0.36 yuan. White sugar was 1.2 yuan per gene. 2 gene came to 2.4 yuan. Soybean oil was 1.8 yuan per gene. 10 gene came to 18 yuan. Cotton cloth was 0.7 yuan per chi. 30 chi came to 21 yuan. Altogether, the total came to 63.76 yuan. Li Mo paid without hesitation, pulling out a stack of great unity notes from his little cloth pouch and counting them out to the saleswoman one by one. He then stuffed all the small items and the cotton cloth into the back basket. He was just about to pick up the grain and leave when he suddenly realized there was still something he hadn't bought. Cigarettes. Li Mo pulled out 2 more great unity notes and continued shouting at the saleswoman, "Give me 10 cartons of Changbai Mountain as well." This time it went smoothly. After taking the money, the saleswoman briskly handed over the cigarettes, 10 cartons of Changbai Mountain neatly stacked on the counter. He put the cigarettes into the back basket, then spent another 6 yuan on 5 gene of pork belly. The pork belly had 3-finger-thick layers of fat, with bright red meat. With coupons, it was 0.8 yuan per gene. Without coupons, it was 1.2 yuan per gene. He slung the back basket onto his back again, rice in his left hand and refined flour in his right. The basket weighed heavily on his shoulder, and the bags of rice and flour made his arms ache from the strain. But now Li Mo started to worry. Just now he had only been focused on buying, and hadn't thought at all about how to transport it back. From here to Xiushui village was dozens of li of mountain road. If he had to walk back on his own 2 legs while carrying so much stuff, he probably wouldn't make it home until midnight. Just as he walked out of the supply and marketing cooperative, he saw a familiar sleigh parked there. Beside it, a middle-aged man was squatting by the steps at the entrance of the cooperative, his back against the wall, a cigarette but hanging from his mouth, with 3 or 4 cigarette butts tossed on the ground. If it wasn't Guandashan, then who else could it be? A thin layer of snow had settled on his dogskin hat, and his shoulders were white as well, making it clear he'd been waiting there for quite a while. At that moment, Guandashan also spotted Li Mo loaded down with bags and bundles. He stood up and said in surprise, "Brother Mosey, did you loot the whole supply and marketing cooperative?" Carrying his things, Li Mo quickly walked over to Guandashan. "Brother Guanyu." Before he could finish the sentence, Guandashan waved a big hand through the air as if shooing away a fly. "Of course I was waiting for you. Otherwise, in this freezing weather, why the hell would I be suffering out here? We mountain folk don't come into town easily. I figured you'd definitely buy a whole lot. I just didn't expect you'd buy this much." As he spoke, he helped take the rice and white flour from Li Mo's hands, one bag in each hand, lifting them with ease, then turned and headed toward the sleigh nearby. Li Mo was secretly moved. It had been many years since he had felt such simple, sincere affection. Even though they had only known each other for less than half a day, Guan was still thinking of him as a friend. A friend like this was worth making. With that thought, Li Mo quickly followed, taking off the back basket and putting it on the sleigh. Then he took 2 cartons of Changbai Mountain out of the basket and stuffed them into Guan Dashin's arms. "What are you doing?" Guan Dashin's palm pressed against Li Mo's wrist. The force wasn't strong, but his attitude was firm. Li Mo pretended not to hear and kept pushing the cigarettes into Guan Dashin's arms. "Brother Guan, this is just a little token from your brother here. If you won't accept it, then you don't want to acknowledge me as your brother." With things put that way, how could Guan Dashin keep refusing? He grabbed the 2 cartons of Changbai Mountain Li Mo handed him and stuffed them straight into his coat, the corners of his mouth nearly splitting to his ears, grinning from ear to ear. "Good brother. Big brother didn't misjudge you." As he spoke, he raised a hand and patted the sleigh behind him. "Sit tight. Big brother's going to show you something new today." Again, Li Mo's face fell on the spot, his expression more bitter than if he had swallowed cactus, and he was even thinking that walking back himself might not be impossible. The moment Guan Dashin saw that look of dislike on his face, he was instantly unhappy and glared. "Mosey, what kind of look is that? Looking down on your big brother, are you? Don't worry. While I was waiting for you at the door just now, I carefully and thoroughly thought it all through. This time there definitely won't be any problem." Seeing that Li Mo still looked hesitant and wouldn't even let his butt touch the sleigh, Guan Dashin didn't say another word. He reached out, grabbed Li Mo by the arm, and forcibly pressed him onto the seat. Then he flipped himself up onto the sleigh as well and briskly snatched up the reins. "Hiya!" With a shout, the Juju-bred horse snorted and slowly started pulling the sleigh toward the direction outside the county town. No sooner had they left than 3 fast horses immediately followed from the street corner behind them. On the horses were 3 burly men with their faces wrapped up tightly, revealing only 3 pairs of gloomy eyes. The sleigh hadn't even left the town yet and was moving slowly along the street, not very fast. As they passed a bun stall by the roadside, Guan Dashin suddenly pulled the reins, and the Juju-bred horse came to a steady stop. White steam from the bamboo steamer drifted over with the wind, carrying a rich meat fragrance, so enticing that it made the cravings in one's belly crawl right out. The 3 burly men on horseback behind them did not stop, but kept an even pace as they passed by the sleigh, their horses' hooves clopping over the snow, looking just like ordinary passers-by who happened to be going the same way. The stall owner was a rotund fat man. The moment he saw Guan Dashin, he smiled until his eyes narrowed into slits and greeted him warmly. "Yo, isn't this Dashin? Haven't seen you for quite some time. Where have you been making your fortune?" Guan Dashin jumped off the sleigh, his boots crunching on the snow, and held up 2 fingers to the fat stall owner. "Old Lou, pack me 20 big meat buns in 2 bags. You got it." Old Lou answered briskly. The moment he lifted the steamer lid, a huge cloud of white steam laced with the scent of meat surged upward, mixed with the uniquely sweet smell of freshly steamed dough, and the cold wind swept it all around, making passing pedestrians unable to resist glancing over a few more times. His movements were skillful, and with a pair of long chopsticks flying up and down, he packed 2 bags of piping hot meat buns in the blink of an eye. They were still hot to the touch through the greaseproof paper bags when he handed them over. One bag had 10 buns. Each one cost 0.25 yuan. So 20 came to exactly 5 yuan. Guan Dashin took the buns with one hand and stuffed the money into old Lu's hand with the other, then turned and handed one of the bags to Li Mo Mosey. "Hurry and eat while they're hot. Old Lu's meat buns have thin skins and lots of filling. And when you bite into one, it's all juice. In the whole county, his are the best." Li Mo didn't stand on ceremony with him. He took the bag and started eating. From yesterday morning until now, not a single grain of rice had entered his stomach, and he was so hungry his chest was practically touching his back. In 2 or 3 bites, 1 meat bun was down his throat. The hot filling and soft bun skin fell into his empty stomach, and a solid sense of satisfaction warmed him all the way from his stomach to his heart. Having something to line the stomach really was a wonderful feeling. After saying goodbye to old Lu at the bun stall, Guan Dashin held the reins in one hand and stuffed buns into his mouth with the other, eating while leisurely driving the sleigh out of town. On the sleigh, the 2 grown men ate like they'd been starving for 800 years. At first they each ate their own, but at some point they inexplicably started competing. Liamo ate 1 in 4 bites, and Guandashan would do 1 in 3. If Liamo finished 1 in 2 bites, Guandashan simply squeezed the bun in his hand, rolled it into a big ball, and shoved the whole thing into his mouth. He chewed a few times at random, then craned his neck and swallowed hard, only to choke on the spot. His eyes were wide as saucers, his mouth hung open without a word coming out, and both hands flailed wildly in midair. Frightened, Liamo quickly put down the bun in his hand and reached over to pat his back, shouting repeatedly, "Slow down, slow down." After quite a bit of struggling, Guandashan finally forced down the mouthful of bun stuck in his throat. He let out a rough breath. Then, without a word, turned around, grabbed a big handful of snow from the sled, stuffed it into his mouth, chewed it up, and swallowed. The icy snowmelt slid down his throat and finally suppressed that choking feeling. Phew, almost choked me to death. After catching his breath, he exchanged a look with Liamo, and seeing how miserable the other looked, the two of them suddenly burst out laughing at the same time, laughing so hard their eyes nearly watered. After finishing the buns, Guandashan raised his hand and looked at the watch on his wrist. The hands were already nearing 2 o'clock. He lifted his head and glanced at the sky. The sun had clearly shifted west, and the light had begun to yellow, glaring off the snow until it made people's eyes ache. Hiya! Without the slightest hesitation, Guandashan raised the whip in his hand and gave the juju-bred horse's rump a sharp crack. The horse let out a neigh, its hooves kicking up snow far into the air as it pulled the sled into a sprint along the snowy road. They had to hurry back. Night travel in this era was nothing like in later generations. Once darkness fell, the mountain forest took on a completely different face. It wasn't just the wild beasts in the mountains that had gone hungry all winter, but also people even harder to guard against than beasts. "Mosey, you made quite a bit of money selling those pelts this time, huh?" Guandashan held the reins in one hand and glanced back at the sled piled high with New Year goods and supplies. Grain, cloth, salt, soybean oil, and all sorts of household items stacked over more than half the sled. Since they had already accepted this brotherly bond, Liamo felt there was no need to hide things, though he still didn't lay all his cards on the table. Not bad. Among this batch of pelts, there was a sable and a fire fox. Together they sold for several hundred. Hearing that, Guandashan's eyes widened, with not the slightest hint of jealousy, only exaggerated astonishment as he cried out, "A sable? A fire fox? Kid, could you be the mountain god's own son or something? I've been slogging around in the mountains all winter, and forget sable, I haven't even seen a single strand of fire fox fur. And you, one shot and you got 2 of them. All the good luck lands on you." As he spoke, he deliberately smacked his lips, putting on an indignant look. "Brother Guan, when it comes to going into the mountains, it all comes down to luck," Liamo said with a smile. "When your luck's good, you can stub your toe and kick up a lump of gold. When your luck's bad, no matter how careful you are, you can still step right into dog shit with 1 foot. That's the truth." Guandashan nodded in full agreement. The two chatted on and off like that, and the sled traveled along the snowy road for about half an hour. When they were nearing a bend, Guandashan suddenly pointed at a string of hoof prints on the ground and muttered to Liamo with his head tilted, "Mosey, do you think there's something wrong with these people's heads? When you go into the mountains, the key is to go early. What time is it now? And they're still heading in." Liamo looked in the direction Guandashan was pointing. He saw a clear line of hoof prints stretching from the roadside all the way into the woods on the hillside. Judging by the number and spacing of the hoof prints, there should be 3 horses, moving in an orderly gait, not marks made by wild horses running around. In the dead of winter, even though the sun was still hanging in the sky now, once it passed 4 o'clock, it would start getting dark. Heading into the mountains at this hour didn't seem like something any proper hunter would do. Hunters going into the mountains always made a point of leaving early rather than late, setting out before dawn and spending the entire day roaming the mountains. Who goes into the mountains at 2 or 3 in the afternoon? 3 horses, 3 people. Liamo ran this information through his mind several times. Suddenly, he thought of the 3 burly men he had run into in town earlier. From the moment they left the supply and marketing cooperative, those 3 had been trailing behind them at a distance. When they stopped to buy buns, the 3 men hadn't stopped either and had gone straight past them. Something's wrong. Liamo felt there was something off, but for the moment, he couldn't put his finger on exactly what it was. The feeling was like a grain of sand in your shoe, so irritating, yet impossible to shake out. The juju-bred horse was still racing ahead, pulling the sled as it was about to rush past the corner. In that instant, Liamo finally figured it out. It was the look in their eyes. Earlier on the street, when the three mounted men passed by the sled, one of them had swept his gaze over the goods on it, and over him sitting there as well. There hadn't been the indifference and absent-mindedness an ordinary passerby should have in that look, but instead something nakedly exposed, the greed of sizing up prey, the coldness of looking at a dead man. Not good, they're desperados. At the very moment Liam realized this, a bone-chilling cold suddenly surged up his back, shooting from his tailbone along his spine all the way to the back of his head, making his scalp tingle. He was all too familiar with this feeling. It was an instinct forced into him in his previous life from facing life-threatening danger again and again in the mountains. He forced himself to stay calm, keeping his face expressionless, and only used the corner of his eye to glance toward the direction the killing intent was coming from. With just one look, half his blood seemed to turn cold. On the hillside to the front right, behind a massive red pine thick enough to take both arms to encircle, a dark gun barrel was sticking out. The barrel swayed slightly, adjusting its angle bit by bit with the sled's movement, as if patiently waiting for its prey to enter the best shooting position. Watch out! Liam didn't hesitate for even a moment. He struck instantly, grabbing the back of Guan Dashin's collar and yanking him hard to the side. The two of them tumbled off the sled together and crashed heavily into the snowbank by the roadside. At the exact moment they hit the ground, a muffled gunshot rang out from the woods. Bang! The wooden backrest of the sled where the two had just been sitting was blown to pieces by the bullet, splinters exploding everywhere. Whitewood fibers curling up in a shocking sight. Pa! What the hell is going on? Guan Dashin had fallen flat on his face. He lifted his head from the snowbank with his face covered in snow, still spitting out bits of it from his mouth. Liam slammed his head back down, his voice extremely low but heavy as if squeezed out through clenched teeth. Don't talk. We've run into desperados. After saying that, Liam yanked up the still-stunned Guan Dashin and darted behind a large rock by the roadside. Damn, that was a fast reaction. Second, third, stop hiding. They've already spotted us. The bandit who had fired the shot came swaggering out of the woods, his face showing a few traces of irritation at having his plan spoiled. Damn it, I wasted a bullet for nothing. The three bandits spread out in a triangular formation, guns raised, and pressed toward the rock where Liam and the others were hiding step by step. As they advanced, they didn't forget to use words to pressure the two of them. Kid, stop hiding. Come out nice and obedient, and I might just spare your worthless lives. Behind the big rock, Liam and Guan Dashin pressed their backs against the freezing stone, neither daring to move an inch. The cold coming off the rock pierced through their padded jackets and into their bones, yet sweat kept streaming down their foreheads. Mosey, what do we do now? How about we surrender? Guan Dashin sounded fairly steady on the surface, but inside he was already in complete turmoil. The fist he had clenched was trembling slightly. Liam shook his head decisively, lowering his voice, but his tone was firm and final. Brother Guan, if we go out now, we're as good as dead. Think about it. This is the strike hard period, and with things so tense, they still dare to come out and rob travelers. That means this bunch are nothing but cold-blooded desperados who kill without blinking. Guan Dashin fell silent. He knew Liam was telling the plain truth. If they weren't desperados, who would dare commit crimes against the wind at a time like this? If they got caught, they could be shot in no time. As the three bandits drew closer and closer, their footsteps crunching in the snow, cold sweat slid down Liam's cheeks from his forehead. Had he just been reborn only to lose his life here? He was so unwilling. Liam suddenly yanked the hunting knife from his waist and gripped the handle tightly in a backhand hold, his knuckles turning slightly white from the force. Brother Guan, let's fight them to the death. Kill one and we break even. Kill two and we profit. After hearing Liam's words, Guan Dashin instead calmed down quickly. Which man who had made a name for himself around these parts hadn't licked blood off a knife's edge? He'd only been stunned by that sudden gunshot just now. That didn't mean he was some cowardly weakling afraid of trouble. But in the current situation, trying to fight three guns with just the hunting knife in Liam's hand was a hopeless situation no matter how you looked at it. Suddenly, he smacked his own head hard, the sound especially sharp in the silence. In the tension, how did I forget about that? What had he come into town for this time? Wasn't it to buy a gun on the black market? For this gun, he'd even had a huge fight with his wife at home, and it had cost a full 400 yuan. Thinking of this, he hesitated no longer and quickly pulled out the big black star he had just gotten from his waist. The heavy gun body in his hand immediately made him feel a bit more secure. He turned and grinned at Liam. Mosey, we're not lambs waiting to be slaughtered either. Seeing the thing that had suddenly appeared in Guan Dashin's hand, Liemo cursed inwardly. You should have said earlier that you had a gun. Damn it. You had me worrying for nothing all this time. Just then, without any warning, Guan Dashin suddenly sprang up and raised the gun, pulling the trigger at one of the vicious bandits. Click, click. The gun didn't fire. Guan Dashin froze completely, staring blankly at the big black star in his hand. He couldn't understand no matter what why the gun he'd paid so much for wouldn't fire at this exact moment. At first, the bandits opposite them were also startled by Guan Dashin's sudden move, especially the one being aimed at by the muzzle. In that instant, he was scared half to death. But when he came back to his senses and felt himself over, he was fine, no holes in him at all. The gun simply hadn't fired. He thought Guan Dashin was just using a fake gun to scare him, and immediately flew into a rage from humiliation. His face flushing dark red as he raised the 5-shot gun in his hand and opened fire at Guan Dashin. The moment the bandit raised his gun, Liemo moved. His right arm flicked, and the hunting knife in his hand, wrapped in a streak of cold light, flew fiercely toward the bandit's head. In his previous life, Liemo was poor and simply had no money to buy a good gun. Added to Wan Ye's tragic death, when he went into the mountains to hunt, it was more to vent the bitterness in his heart. Only secondarily did he trade game for a weight. As time went on, he had instead developed a superb throwing knife skill. Within 30 meters, he could hit exactly where he aimed. His farthest record was killing a sika deer with one knife from over 40 meters away. And at this moment, the nearest bandit was only a little over 20 meters away from them. Whoosh! The hunting knife traced a dazzling white arc through midair, carrying an unstoppable force, heading straight for the bandit's face. Thud! The bandit only felt a chill on his forehead and didn't even have time to make a sound before he fell straight backward onto the ground. At the instant he fell, his finger convulsively pulled the trigger. Bang! The buckshot all struck less than half a meter in front of Guan Dashin, blasting up a huge cloud of snowy mist, with broken snow spraying all over his body and face. Only then did Guan Dashin snap out of it, like waking from a dream. Grabbing the gun, he jerked back behind the rock, his back already soaked through with cold sweat. Second brother. Second brother. Seeing their companion die on the spot, the eyes of the two remaining bandits turned red. Completely enraged, they no longer cared whether they could see anyone or not, and simply raised their guns and fired wildly at the place where Liemo and Guan Dashin were hiding. Bullets struck the rock, sending up trails of sparks and stone chips. Leaning against the rock, Guan Dashin gasped for breath in great gulps, staring blankly at the big black star in his hand. Only then did he realize that he had been too nervous just now, so nervous he'd even forgotten to chamber around. Just as he was about to fumble and panic to rack the slide, his vision blurred, and then his hand was suddenly empty. The gun was already in Liemo's hand. Click! Liemo gripped the big black star, flicked his wrist, and smoothly chambered around. Tossing out, "Stay hidden here," he had already leaned out sideways. He raised his hand and fired a shot. Bang! The bullet screamed out, but unfortunately marksmanship really wasn't his strong suit. He had originally aimed for the head, but in the end only hit the bandit leader in the shoulder. But the power was still horrifying enough, and blood immediately splattered out. Seeing that Liemo and the others actually dared to fire back, the two remaining bandits instantly scrambled and crawled behind an earthen slope, not daring to show themselves again. Just now they had thought the other side had no gun, which was why they dared to charge so brazenly. Now that bullets were already hitting flesh, if they still stubbornly kept fighting to the death, that would be pure idiocy. When that one shot failed to produce the effect he had hoped for, Liemo wasn't discouraged. Instead, he felt that this was only normal. If he were better than everyone else at everything, what would he need other people for? Just then, the bandit leader's panting shout came from behind the dirt slope. "Brother, I was blind and offended a true master. Please be magnanimous and spare us this once, all right?" The bone in his right shoulder had already been shattered by the terrifying power of the big black star. His whole arm hung limply, and he had little fighting strength left. Second brother had also lost his life, and the only one left by his side was third brother, a useless piece of baggage trembling all over like a sieve. They had lost this fight, but considering the other side only had one pistol, he still gathered his courage and cautiously tried to sue for peace. Liemo tightened his grip on the big black star. The muzzle always pointed in the direction where the other side was hiding, and replied loudly, "It's better to settle a feud than deepen it. Life isn't easy for any of us. I say fine." The moment Guan Dashin heard that, he grew anxious and shouted at Liemo in a low voice, Mosey, before he could finish. He saw Liam-O make a silencing gesture to him and gently shake his head. The words at Guan Dashin's lips were forcibly swallowed back down, and he shut his mouth. The bandit leader's voice came again, with a touch of deliberate warmth in his tone. Brother, it's really wonderful that you think that way. Let's both put our guns down and go our separate ways. How about it? Okay. Liam-O agreed without the slightest hesitation. He signaled Guan Dashin to keep hiding behind the rock, while he himself slowly stood up from behind the cover. Only, his gaze remained nailed like a spike in the direction where the bandits were hiding, never shifting away for even a moment. I'm already out. Liam-O shouted toward the front. Coming out right away, don't shoot. Behind the dirt slope, the bandit leader endured the intense pain and shot Third Brother a look. Third Brother understood and nodded. The brothers had partnered together for more than 10 years. And with just one look from the boss, he knew what to do. The boss wanted him to go out first to draw the other side's attention so he could find a chance to avenge Second Brother. Thump. First, a 5-shot gun was thrown out from behind the dirt slope, landing on the snow. Immediately after, the bandit leader came slowly out from behind the dirt slope with his left hand raised, his right arm hanging limp and his face deathly pale. Looking at the black muzzle in Liam-O's hand, he endured the piercing pain in his shoulder and forced out a smile uglier than crying. Brother, we've already thrown away our gun, so do you think the one in your hand could also? Liam-O looked at the bandit leader, the corners of his mouth curling up into a smile of unclear meaning. He raised his hand as if to throw the gun out. The bandit leader wore a fawning smile on his face, but a trace of secret delight flashed in his eyes, and in his heart, he kept muttering, throw it, throw it. As long as you don't have a gun, you're not worth a damn. Bang! Without any warning, Liam-O's hand, which had seemed to be tossing the gun forward, suddenly lifted upward, his wrist flipping, and the black muzzle pointed directly at the bandit leader's forehead. Fire burst from the muzzle, and the bullet entered through the center of his brow, its terrifying kinetic force churning wildly inside his skull, finally blasting open a blood hole the size of a fist in the back of his head. Red and white splattered all over the head and face of Third Brother, the bandit who was just about to poke himself out from behind the dirt slope to launch a sneak attack, the warm and sticky liquid streaming straight down his cheeks. The robber chief's eyes were wide open, intense unwillingness frozen in them, as he fell backward into the snow. His body twitched a few times, then never moved again. The third robber was splattered all over the face. Feeling the warmth on his face and the strong, pungent stench of blood on the tip of his tongue, the double-barreled shotgun in his hands dropped to the ground with a clatter. He didn't even care to spit out the blood and brain matter that had splashed into his mouth, and with a thud he dropped to his knees in the snow, smashing his forehead against the snow like his life depended on it, kowtowing repeatedly. "Spare me, hero, spare me. It was all my big brother's idea. Now that he's dead, please let me go?" Liam-O shot Guan Dashin a look. Guan Dashin got the hint and jogged over, picking up all the weapons the three robbers had thrown down, 2 5-shotguns and 1 double-barreled shotgun. Liam-O lowered his head and looked at the third robber, who was still kowtowing nonstop in the snow, his eyes full of mockery. "Letting you go isn't impossible." He raised a hand and lightly waved off Guan Dashin, who was just about to speak up an object. "What do you plan to use to buy your miserable life?" The moment the third robber heard there was still room to negotiate, he hurriedly shoved a hand into his pocket and, trembling, pulled out a crumpled stack of bills, holding it out to Liam-O with both hands. "Hero, as long as you're willing to spare me, all this money is yours." Liam-O looked at him as if he were an idiot and let out a scornful laugh. "Are you a fucking idiot? If I kill you, the money's still mine." Huh. That one sentence completely short-circuited the third robber. He opened his mouth, then thought about it carefully, and it was indeed hard to argue with. If he died, the money would still belong to someone else. "Hurry up, my patience is limited." Liam-O's voice suddenly turned cold, and he impatiently shook the muzzle of his gun. "If you can't come up with something worth trading for your life, I'll send you on your way right now." No. The third robber kept kowtowing while seeming to struggle inwardly over something enormous. Finally, he suddenly gritted his teeth, as if making some kind of decision. "I can tell you a secret, but you have to swear that after learning the secret, you'll spare my life. Otherwise, even if I die and take this secret into the coffin with me, I absolutely won't tell you." Liam-O had only intended to toy with this third robber a bit, to ease the tense atmosphere. In times like these, once guns were involved, it became a life-or-death situation. How could anyone just let the other side go? What if he came back afterward with people to seek revenge? Wouldn't that just be asking for trouble? Liamo had only bluffed casually, but unexpectedly. He really did bluff something valuable out of him. Judging from how the man looked ready to die rather than reveal it easily, this secret seemed to carry quite a bit of weight. Liamo, swear, he said aloud, holding up 3 fingers. As long as the secret you tell is enough to buy your life, I'll let you go. Then his tone changed, and his eyes suddenly turned cold as knives as he added, word by word, but if you dare play tricks and fool me, then I'll skin you alive, tear your tendons out, chop you to pieces, and feed you to the dogs. Hearing Liamo swear, the huge stone in the third robber's heart finally dropped. In those days, people still held oaths in considerable awe. No one dared treat swearing lightly as a joke. He climbed up from the ground and brushed the snow dust off his knees. Tui. First he turned his head and spat a thick glob of phlegm mixed with red and white matter onto the snow, then raised his sleeve to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth, and flashed Liamo a grin. Brother, I'm not bragging. If this gets out, it'll blow a huge hole in the sky. Liamo frowned, and a trace of displeasure flashed through his eyes, the muzzle in his hand lifting again. If you don't start talking now, then don't ever talk again. I'll talk. The third robber waved his hands frantically in fear, no longer daring to be coy. About 100 li from Xiushui village, at Haifengku, there's a treasure hidden there left behind by a high-ranking official from the former Qing dynasty. Treasure? Guan Dashin's eyes lit up, and his breathing unconsciously grew heavier. Seeing that this reaction had worked, that smug look of make them beg me began to faintly reappear on the third robber's face. Bang! A deafening gunshot rang out, and the bullet grazed the tip of the third robber's shoe before burying itself in the snow, blasting open a fist-sized black hole. A wisp of white smoke curled up from the snow pit. Liamo blew on the bluish smoke from the muzzle and coldly tossed out a sentence. One more word of nonsense, and the next bullet will feed on your head. The third robber's legs went weak with fright, and he collapsed butt first into the snow, a dark wet stain quickly spreading across his crotch, while the sharp stink of urine spread through the cold air. Trembling, he raised a hand and pointed at the already stiffened robber chief beside him. The treasure map. The treasure map is on him. He carries it on him every day. This time Liamo didn't even need to signal. Guan Dashin strode over, yanked open the robber chief's padded jacket, and stripped it off in a few quick motions. Right in front of the third robber, he squatted on the ground and searched through it item by item. From the lining, he dug out 3 bundles of 10-yuan notes, several colorful ration coupons, and 2 little yellow gold bars. But he still couldn't find the so-called treasure map. Damn it, you dare lie to me. Guan Dashin shot to his feet, rushed over, grabbed the third robber by the collar, and swung his hand in full force, delivering a rapid string of hard slaps right across his face. Those slaps were viciously strong, directly knocking several teeth out of the third robber's mouth, and blood mixed with saliva ran from the corner of his lips. The third robber neither resisted nor cried out, but only muttered to himself in a daze, "Impossible. I clearly saw Big Brother hide the map on his body with my own eyes, so how could it be gone? Smack, smack, smack. How dare you lie to me? How dare you lie to me?" Guan Dashin kept on slapping him. Liamo carefully observed the third robber's expression. That face full of shock and confusion didn't look faked. A person's eyes don't lie. That's enough. If you keep hitting him, you'll beat him to death. Bring me the padded jacket, so I can take a look. Only then did Guan Dashin stop, cursing under his breath as he picked up the dark blue padded jacket from the ground and walked over to hand it to Liamo. Liamo took the jacket and, instead of immediately checking the pockets, used his fingertips to carefully feel along the fabric inch by inch. In his previous life, he had seen on TV that some people, to keep valuable things from being lost, would sew them into clothes they wore close to the body. When his fingers reached the back of the collar, the pads of his fingers suddenly touched something unusual. The thickness there felt somewhat different from the rest, subtle enough that you wouldn't notice it without careful inspection. Brother Guan, knife. Right. Guan Dashin hurried over to the second robber's corpse, grabbed the hilt of the invasion knife still stuck in his forehead, and yanked it out with force. He wiped the blade on the man's clothes. Seeing it wasn't clean, he crouched in the snow and scrubbed it hard for a while, until not a trace of blood could be seen on it. Only then did he run back. Holding the blade, he offered the handle into Liamo. Here. Liamo took the invasion knife, aimed the tip at the inside of the collar, and carefully sliced open a small slit. Then he slid the invasion knife back into the sheath at his lower back, extended his right index finger into the opening, and pulled outward hard. Rip! With the sound of fabric tearing, a grayish-brown piece of hide slipped out from the lining. Hey, there really is a treasure map. Just as the hide was about to fall into the snow, Guan Dashin reacted quickly and snatched it in his hand. He turned over and over this hide, thin as a cicada's wing, examining it, running through nearly every kind of leather he had seen in most of his life, yet he couldn't match it to a single one. "Mosey, what kind of hide is this made from?"